And we have Anna Youngman, who is here to present as part of that public participation. Anna, if you'd like to come to the table, please. Thank you very much. Now, under the standing orders for this public forum part of the meeting, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation to us. I do need to advise that this morning there will not be the opportunity for questions on this matter in the context of some media coverage this morning suggesting a threat of legal action against council. So it wouldn't be appropriate for us to have that degree of interaction, but we're certainly pleased to hear from Anna for the 5 minutes, and I make that clear so that, Anna, you can use the whole 5 minutes for your presentation, and we've got a clock that'll tell you where we are with that as well. So good to have you with us. Welcome to the table. Over to you.
Actually, before we start, I would like to make a correction about the legal action. That is quite incorrect. That has been reported. I spoke to a reporter yesterday, and the words were, would your group consider taking legal action against the quarries? And I said, I'm not 100% sure at this stage. So I would like to clarify that to the councillors, please.
All right, thank you.
Before we start.
Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, the advice I've received is that it wouldn't be appropriate to allow questions and answers. But I'm certainly happy to hear the presentation, and I'm also happy to take the clock back to 5 minutes, if we can, please, so that there's the full 5 minutes for the presentation. But thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Well, good morning. My name is Anna Youngman, and I'm a resident of the Old West Coast Road in Yoldhurst. Some of you may have heard of crystalline silica, the crystalline silica issue that we have in our area, and some of you may have not. Quarries in our area and all over Canterbury have been allowed to come very close to dwellings. People have been having health issues, so testing was done, and the result was 30% crystalline silica on a resident's property right next door to me. This is considered extremely high. Crystalline silica particles are invisible, and so they are so tiny that they get right into the base of the lungs, and because of their jagged edges, they lodge into the lung and make that area non-functional. Breathing in this dust can lead to very serious health issues, silicosis, which is similar to asbestosis, and a terrible death. Because of the dangers of crystalline silica, Dr. Alistair Humphrey and ECAN have made a public statement, and that was on the 9th of March, 4 months ago, that no dust would leave quarry boundaries. I and other residents have been having health issues for a long time, and it's not been taken seriously. I had extensive lung tests done by a respiratory specialist at Christchurch Hospital in April, and the results came back that the symptoms I am experiencing were the result of crystalline silica. And the specialist's words were that hopefully sanity will prevail and the cause will be stopped. We and other residents have been told by our GPs to sell and move because of the dangers to our health. But seriously, who would we sell to? We are not going to put another family at risk. Environmental protection agencies recommend a separation distance of 500 metres when crystalline silica is involved. Attached is a letter from Amy Adams, also endorsing 500 metres. Unfortunately, CCC and ECAN planners got us into this mess by endorsing Winstone's extension to the quarry less than 200 metres from 6 dwellings. CCC planners do not use their own dust experts at resource consent hearings. Your planners have been relying on the applicant's experts. The quarry's dust expert knows about the composition of grey-wacky aggregate and high silica content. You only need to go to Winstone's website to find this information. Unfortunately, at resource consent hearings, this information has not been disclosed by experts, but was mentioned by resident submissions and ignored. It is only because residents have been very active, along with the help of Dr. Kelvin Duncan, ex-Dean of Science of Canterbury University, that the true dangers have surfaced. It's very disappointing that CC planners think they know better than environmental protection agencies. Also, resource consents can be reviewed, but your planner, John Higgins, is not actively doing this. I understand March and September are the times. If health dangers would not be a reason to review, what would be? So here in my hand is a mask. Now this mask has been recommended by Alistair Humphrey that I wear in my home, indoors and outdoors. I can tell you, this is terrible. I get very breathless. Also outdoors, I only just wear the mask. Not only do I wear the mask, I have to put on protection over my eyes to protect them. They get so itchy and so runny, it's like sandpaper in my eyes. And this is Christchurch. I just can't tell you how bad it is. Some have experienced some direct neighbours, regular discharge from their noses when they blow their nose. I personally, every morning, have gunk in my mouth. After a shower, it is grey on the face cloth or washer when I have washed my face. Our stock are suffering from a disease called pink eye. One resident has had to move her horses away from the area on the advice of a vet, and her young teenagers have to go elsewhere to ride and enjoy the horses. As a resident and ratepayers, we are highly disappointed that the Mayor and CEO of CCC have not been replying to emails. I personally have sent emails 2 or 3 months ago that I couldn't breathe. I was indoors. This was to Leanne and Carleen Edwards. I couldn't breathe, and here I am in my own home wearing a mask. Could they please help me? I've just been ignored. Instead of helping the residents, a decision was made just to ignore us. It is frustrating paying rates to CCC and ECAN when you're not protecting our health. Where's your duty of care, councillors? I would appreciate if you could take some time to Google crystalline silica and read for yourself just how toxic and dangerous it is. What we need now is for CCC to acknowledge the Environmental Pollution Agency's separation distance of 500 metres. This is urgent because our health is deteriorating, not just for our area, but for the likes of the Gilberthorpe School with young children, a preschool opposite, that are going to have to endure what I'm having to endure. I have spoken for an hour and a half with Erin Brockovich. She just cannot believe it. She told me to keep it out there and to keep talking, to keep it up, because it's not right. I'm not going to go away. Well, that's if I can help it, if there's not an autopsy done. Look, why aren't you all listening to the experts that know better? Because they do. In third world countries, why I say a third world country, Pakistan and India, 500 metres is the setback distance. The quarries are running riot. They've been cowboys for some time and they have been allowed to self-monitor.
Okay, that brings us to the end of the 5 minutes.
Fine, there's the silica on my windows, here's the dust along our road, and thank you very much for the opportunity of telling you what it's like to be a prisoner in Christchurch, the Garden City.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come along and present to us this morning. I'm sure there are matters of interest that you've raised.
Can I just make the comment that there is no legal action against the council, and so therefore councillors should be able to ask questions? That's
been made clear, but we are at the end of the 5 minutes, so there wouldn't be the opportunity for that in any case. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to come along to talk to us this morning.
Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, so now we move into the next part of the meeting. which is the deputations by appointment. Now, we have 8 deputations this morning, all of which are on the same issue, which is the Yaldhurst subdivision, the Infinity Yaldhurst issue. With 8 deputations, it's important that we keep closely to time, so there is 10 minutes allowed for each of those deputations, and 10 minutes would include questions. I'm expecting that the deputations will be pertaining to the matter that we're debating and deciding today. I'm aware that there are a number of historic matters that contribute to the environment in which we're making that decision, but I think what councillors will be interested in hearing will be matters that pertain to the decision that we're making today. I would encourage, and I think this message has been conveyed already, for those making deputations to provide new information to us rather than repeating simply what a previous deputation has said to us. And if there is time for questions from councillors, I would also encourage councillors to think about whether their question is relevant to the issues that we're discussing today rather than to other matters. So there will be limited time for questions because of the number of deputations that we've got. It's important that we use that time wisely, and I will be attempting to share the opportunity for questions equally around those councillors who wish to ask questions. So really is making sure that we get the most value from the limited time that there may be to answer questions on these deputations. All right, so item 3.2, deputations by appointment. I invite Colin Stokes to the table, please. Colin, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. I'll just hand the documents around.
Great, thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, you have 10 minutes, and that would include any time for questions.
Thank you. I'll just load the thing up to make it a bit easier for councillors.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm guessing they were going out alone. Right, so we've got the paperwork distributed. Is there are you running a PowerPoint as well?
Yes, I'm just putting.
Oh, which one? What do you want?
Is this, I think?
So if you just do it open.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Great, okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll be starting the time.
Okay. Okay, I'm ready to go.
All right, great. So if you'd like to make a start, that'll be great. Thank you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. You have 10 minutes and we'll start the clock now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for giving the opportunity here. That there is just a plan of the subdivision where I'll just rotate that to... so north is at the top, Yolders is at the top there, and the outline of the yellow there, of that there is the subdivision consent that we're talking about. So our land is included in the subdivision consent. There's a lot of misinterpretation that we're adjoined to it. We're actually part of it, and our roading is a requirement of the resource consent. Without our road vesting, there's a non-compliance with it. We first found out about Infinity's discussions with the council behind closed doors about circumventing our covenants that are protecting our inclusion in the subdivision. It's a memorandum, we got it of 2 December 2016, and it's in your bundle of documents that's got that plan picture on the front, about the 4th page in. I'd just like to cover a couple of things in there. The council were only asking for Infinity's legal advice and their own. They didn't ask us for our legal advice or what our interpretations were. However, at paragraph 3 of that, it says Infinity's legal advice is that the covenants in question will be met by Infinity's development proceeding with their stage 1 survey plan, and the council's legal advice concurs with that. Well, we concur with that too, because the covenant requires our roading to be included in the first stage. Once our roading is included, well, of course, the covenant's not necessary anymore. I believe someone else will have the actual evidence from Goldban and Noble's own lawyers stating exactly the same thing, and they were the ones that passed the rights to Infinity. Also, at paragraph 4 of that same memorandum from the council, Infinity said that they approached the 12 owners of the land, which is the affected residents, and said there was some resistance from them, and specifically named myself, Colin Stokes. Well, the only resistance there was getting a noose put round our neck and the stool kicked out from underneath us. We did everything we could. We bent over backwards to work with Infinity. We offered to take the covenants off. We offered to give them our sole access right to Yolders Road, which they need to open their subdivision. We offered the whole front of our access lot, which is the green bit at the top there going to Yolders Road. We own that. That's part of their consent for their supermarket area. We offered to give them that as well. So we offered to give them everything, and we even offered in the finish after negotiations to contribute to complying with the conditions they must comply under the resource consent by actually chipping in and undertaking the roading ourselves, which is a condition of their... But they refused that. The whole issue around it is that the council staff have allowed variations to the consent non-notified. We've been denied legal rights since 2009, and they've removed stormwater conditions such that our roading, which is a requirement of the consent, cannot be vested, which means there'll be a complete and total permanent non-compliance with the subdivision consent. Now, if we look at that plan there, you'll see those blue basins in the middle. They were the consented stormwater basins at the very outset. You'll see those red squares crossed each side of them there. The original conditions of the consent, conditions 9.5, required that land to be set aside with easements over it in favour of the council in case it was required for stormwater provision, which it is. However, somewhere along the line within council, they just eliminated that condition as part of their variations. No assessment, no application to remove it, it just went, gone. So the resistance from us was, we want the covenants off, we don't want the covenants on. Covenants off, we want our subdivision. But the covenants are protecting that we're included in it. So the covenants are not preventing the subdivision going ahead, they're just protecting that we're included in it. And we want them off ASAP, we want our roads in there. You've been led to believe that there's a court action to get the covenants off. That's not true at all. There's an arbitration clause in our sales and purchase agreement back to 2002. The matter's currently in arbitration right now. We have a conference call tomorrow in relation to it. The arbitration could be over at any time. So it doesn't go to court to get the covenants off. That's false. And there's documentation coming up and others, I won't double up on that. But the point is, even with the covenants off, there's no the information we have is that Infinity don't want to vest the roads with the council anyway. We've got documents going back to 2010 through other matters that we've got through Official Information Acts and other things, that Noble had always planned to own the roads and the services and charge rates for them to people. And that they were never going to vest them, and that Delta were going to buy in 50% share of that. So Delta were going to own the infrastructure, the services, the pipes, the stormwater, etc., and charge people for it, which would include us, because we need those utilities coming through their land to get to us. And the consent that we're a part of includes us. So we'd be completely at ransom. Notwithstanding the fact that our road can't be built at the moment because there's no stormwater provision in the variations they've made. Now I'll just run through I've done a review there, which obviously we won't get through in the time we've got. But what that is setting out, I'll just go through a few documents there. On the front page of that, it starts at the top, Covenants Protecting Residents' Inclusion, Review and Summary. The first part there, 2002-2003 is when residents bought the land in there. You'll see further term 15 clause there requires our inclusion of our road, etc. It had to happen within 2 years of rezoning. Rezoning was 2006, our roads were due in 2008. The developer reneged and the council staff changed the conditions such that it made it impossible. Below that, 2003 is when we registered the covenants. They were registered over the land. They protected our inclusion. Now, you've been misrepresented there that it was all about pig farming and trimming trees and the likes with that. Well, yes, they were in the covenant, but the terms of extinguishment of the covenant is at Schedule C, and that's at the bottom of that front page there. And you'll see that requires 1.2 and 1.3. 1.3.2, I'll just read that, it's worthy. To vest or dedicate the part of the servient land included in the access lot of the road widening area, as defined in the agreements for sale and purchase, of which the servient land was sold by the developer as legal road, and transfer or relinquish all estate or interest in those areas to local authority for $1. That needs to happen before the covenant comes off. Nothing to do with pig farming. The covenant, what it does, it combines all disparate owners in there. There's so many different owners in there. The only way this could work is to join them all together, and that even if they didn't want the road, they've got to get it, because the ones that want it obviously want it. So even if the developer doesn't want it, or other residents in there that want a lifestyle block, it doesn't matter. They knew the covenant was on the land when they bought it, and the requirement of the covenant to come off is the road's vested. So that's what they bought into, and that's protecting our legal interests. And that's what the council's voting on, to circumvent our legal interest. The solution is very simple. All the council needs to do is require Infinity to comply with the conditions of the resource consent, which is they have to do by law anyway, and by law the council has to enforce those. If they do that, then the road needs to be vested. It's legally required by the subdivision consent, legally required by the RMA, and legally required by our protective covenant that you're voting to circumvent. There is no risk to this proposal. If you look at the council's report to you at 7.11, it says that the full risk is borne by the developer and low risk to the council. So while you've been told by the lawyers and been scaremongered that there's some risk to the council just by the council complying with the law and enforcing the conditions of the consent that Infinity's always known about, well, I can't see how you can be sued for doing what the law requires. In fact, there's parts of the Resource Management Act which is in here, section 128, which actually requires the council to review their conditions of the consent if they can see that they're not being affected correctly, which would include reinstating the condition 9.5, which took out those red boxes required for stormwater. So the council can legally do that. There's no fear of threat there. Infinity have always known about the resource consent they took on and all about the past issues. Delta is the major financier of the project. Delta came in and built the roads and put the finance in to build them, and they were part of a joint venture with Noble. They used mortgagee powers to transfer it to a new joint venture called Infinity, which is Delta's part of that as well. So Delta's part of both joint ventures. Delta's always known about these problems. They actually built the roads and the stormwater infrastructure. They've always known that we weren't included in it, and they always knew we were required to, because to raise a mortgage on the land, they needed our consent. We put caveats on there to protect our interests back in 2008. They knew about that. We consented to their mortgage on the basis that it included our provisions. They took the mortgage on that basis, so they've always known about it. Delta put in about 13.5 million of the 18.5 million that was passed from one joint venture to the next 4.
Now that brings us to the end of the 10 minutes set aside for the deputation.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, we do need to keep strictly to the 10 minutes because of the number of deputations that we've got this morning. So apologise for interrupting, but we do need to end the deputation at that point. I don't know whether there's a couple of finishing up comments that you'd like to make just to round things off.
Well, all I can say is thank you for that, and no problem butting in. All I can say is there is a lot more than this that meets the eye, and to make a decision based on this without all that information, that's very critical. We've actually asked to come and see the councillors before through our lawyers, and we haven't had anything back. We're saying you cannot make a decision without the full facts. That was only a fraction of them, just a fraction. So we would suggest that get with us and meet with us. We just want this resolved. We want it to go ahead. We're not NIMBYs next door. We're part of the same subdivision. We've been fighting for years for inclusion, and it's cost us a fortune. Right. So we want to get around and resolve this. So please meet with us and solve these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us this morning. I'll just make a comment now about the order of the meeting. This particular matter is going to involve us taking some legal advice, and there may well be questions that councillors want to ask of our lawyers based on that legal advice, and of course based on what we hear in the number of deputations that we've got this morning. So that means that we need to go into public excluded to hear that legal advice. My intention therefore is that we hear the deputation, the number of deputations we've got this morning, that we then will deal with the community board reports and the other open agenda items of the meeting. We'll then go into public excluded and we'll consider the legal advice in that public excluded part of the meeting, at which point, once we've done that, we'll come back out of the public excluded section and we'll have the full debate and the decision making on this matter in the open meeting after we've come out of public excluded. So I appreciate that that means that there will be a delay for those submitters that want to hear the debate and the decision. I would remind everybody concerned that there's the ability to do that either by coming back into the room once we come out of public excluded, or on the live stream, which will carry all of the public parts of the meeting.
Thank you, thank you. May I just suggest that we're actually not the public, we're actually affected parties in this matter, and we would be welcome to be coming along to the public excluded, because we're not public, we're affected, we're part of it, and we think that our legal opinion is important too. You're only getting a legal opinion of the developer and the council, so we would like to be party to that if you would allow us.
Thank you for your comments. We've obviously taken some advice on that, but thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
We'll now move to the second deputation, and I invite Shane Philpott to the table, please.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll go around the whole. Okay, so if you want to start.
Beautiful. Excuse me.
Okay, we'll just wait for the distribution of the papers and then we'll make a start. Okay, thank you for joining us this morning. You have 10 minutes for the deputation, and that would allow time for any questions if you wanted to leave time within the 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, councillors, for hearing me here today. I'll try and whiz through this as quickly as I can, and I'll point you to the relevant pages if we just go through them. Firstly, obviously, there's a bit of a concern with the memo, Mr Holland's memo to the council, that he hasn't divulged the full details of the covenant. The covenant on page 2, as you can see there, in which Colin has gone over himself, you'll see down there at 1.3.2, I'll just go over this again, to vest or dedicate the part of the servient land included in the access lot or the road widening area as defined in the agreements for sale and purchase, which go back to 2002 and 2003, of which the majority of us here were party to, and was sold to the developer as a legal road, and to transfer or relinquish all estate or interest in those areas to the local authority for $1. So that's, the covenant is protecting that our road vests in the council. Just whizzing on to page 3 there, there's a further clause in our 2002 and 2003 agreements, which is the vesting or dedication of the road access lot and the road widening area. And again, as part of the process of pursuing the further consent and undertaking the further subdivision, the vendor will, on behalf of the purchaser and the other noble owners, apply for the vesting or dedication of the access lot, including the road widening area, in the relevant authority. There's a further term there that Colin has mentioned in terms of the lot 9 owners there, that in the event the further subdivision is approved and work undertaken for residential subdivision by the vendor or the adjourning, on the adjourning development, then the vendor undertakes to provide full width roading to Living 1 standard. It's now been superseded to Living G. I think it's even been superseded again, at its cost, together with sewer, power, telephone, water and stormwater connection to this zone standard to lot 9. So the developer was obligated to provide those services to us within the 2 years of the residential rezoning, which was August 2008. Going on to the next page, which is, Colin's touched on this also, 5.0, this is in the resource consent, new roads to vest. The new roads, being lots 600 to 615, are to be formed and vested in the council. Now, our access lot road is lot 612, and obviously 600 to 615, that includes access lot 612. You can see under that the stormwater clause 9.5, which was originally in the resource consent. And what this did, if you just go right down to the bottom there, to ensure this requirement is met, the consent holder shall register on deposit of the plans for stage 1 of the subdivision a drainage easement over lots 70 to round to 166. So there's about 8 lots that the council easements were lodged in favour of the council to protect the area of areas required for the stormwater for all of those roads 600 to 615. And on the very next page, and this is the coloured plan that Colin had provided you, you see those red areas there on the right, and they were the areas that were to be protected for the stormwater for all of the roads, including our road. On page 5, you'll see there's a picture there of the flooding. This is at the eastern end of the access lot of our road, and this is at the point where it joins the Infinity subdivision via Road 2, which is a short section of land which of about 40 metres, which then joins through to the Spine Road. So obviously we've got flooding problems every time it rains. If you look right up the end there past the water, you can sort of vaguely see where the road goes right to the end of the trees. That's about probably 350 metres long. So what the current stormwater plan is, the consented stormwater plan is basically taking the water, which you can see puddled here, about 1.5 metres uphill, about 400 metres past the trees at the back. These stormwater basins, which are proposed on lot 20, are uphill, and they're proposed to be about 4 metres deep. And we know there's a bit of a problem with getting the stormwater to these basins up the hill, because of in the event of an extreme event storm or system failure, the basins must overflow to Paparua Stream, which is the nearest natural outfall. And there's a height problem with that stream.
Ask them to put that up.
Oh, what do you?
Just ask them to put the screen up for there so they can see it.
Oh.
For the. Can you put the picture of the laptop up there? Is it?
We're going on to page 7. June 20th, 2011, the consultant planner Graham Taylor's planning report recommended that the Commissioner consents to the narrow spine road. In the same report, Mr Taylor strikes out the stormwater clause 9.5, which was protecting the stormwater for the access lot for our road. This happened non-notified on adversely affected parties. You see there that, that this is actually, as is shown in his planning report, that clause is actually struck through. In July 2011, the Commissioner rubber stamped the variation consent recommending the narrow roads, and the stormwater clause protecting the access lot road stormwater disappeared. Going on to the next page, December the 2nd, 2011, there's an email there from a senior council planning engineer to Cardno, who's the designer, was the designer for the subdivision, and other council engineers. And just down there it says that this development has caused a few hiccups with construction moving ahead of acceptance of plans. So effectively, Noble put the infrastructure in the ground without having a resource consent. And the problem with that is that the stormwater infrastructure was insufficient in capacity to cater for our access lot road. So the cumulative result of these hiccups is that, as I've just said, is the potential loss of 32 consented medium to low density lots on the east-west leg of the access lot road. The low density lots were a requirement of the living G zone to provide a balance between Noble's mostly high density lots. Following the deletion of that stormwater clause in January 2012, Cardno provides a stormwater catchment plan revision B to the council, draining all access lot stormwater impossibly to lots on lot 20 and 21, which are 1.5 metres higher than the eastern end of the access lot. And revision D is, that's been superseded by revision D, but the lot 20 basins are still the resource consented basins. Next page, page 9. In June 2014, the Cardno engineer Mark Thompson submits a split stormwater catchment plan to the council, and you can see revision F is near the back. And what he's doing is he's draining half of lot 22 east to the Noble pylon basins and the other half west and uphill to lot 20. This plan shows a change from draining all of the access lot road and possibly uphill to lot 20, instead only draining approximately half west to lot 20, with the other half draining east to the Noble pylon basins. The existing large dwellings remain draining directly to individual soak pits. Mr Norton, who's the stormwater engineer, replied that this was approaching something that may be acceptable, but the devil was in the details. Paragraph 13 there, Cardno designers Kate McKenzie submits a further stormwater revision plan to council, November 28th, 2014, revision G, which should be about the third one at the back there, plan at the back. It is essentially the same as the revision F, but shows that Noble lots behind the basin 3A have been reduced from 7 to 5.
20 seconds to end the deputation.
Okay, so effectively the result of all this is that there's a requirement for a split catchment of our stormwater. At least half of our stormwater needs to go on to Infinity Land, and in doing that, because the stormwater infrastructure and piping network is insufficient in size, the roads actually need to be dug up. And right at the back there is a plan there presented to us by Infinity which shows lines on a plan which show the areas of the spine road which will need to be dug up and retrofitted with extra stormwater capacity to cater for the access lot road.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning. That unfortunately doesn't leave any time for questions, but thanks for the papers that you've distributed as well. Thank you very much.
10 minutes goes quick.
So we now move on to our third deputation, and I invite Greg Smith to the table, please.
We've got page 1 with the main map.
Okay, we'll just wait for the papers to be distributed. Sure. And then we'll make a start. Thank you for joining us. So you have 10 minutes. That 10 minutes would include any time that you wanted to leave for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Greg Smith. I own some property in this subdivision here. I'd just really like to look at this from a take away some of the detail. There's a lot of details come out from Colin and Shane, which is all really relevant, and I do hope that's read through before you can make a decision on what's going to happen with this road and the covenants. I'd like to take a look at it from an overview, really, and look at it from a moral standpoint, and also what the covenant means to us and how it started. The history does have a lot to do with this. The land that you can see there inside that yellow band up on the board and on the document that you've got in front of you is the whole subdivision, and that was owned by the 10 lot owners in those smaller lots to the left there. And so this subdivision really only came about when all the landowners gave that land for $10 each, so around at that stage $80 to the developer, 24 hectares of residentially zoned land for $80, and the only requirement really was from that point was for inclusion in the subdivision, and that was set out in sales and purchase agreements, which don't have too much to do with council. But one of the problems with development companies is they come and go, and this one's gone. When we signed up, one of the protections though that we had was the covenants that were registered over the land, and that's what we're talking about here today. Clause 1.3.2 was our insurance or our certainty that our road would be vested in council, and it put a requirement on the developer to make application for that vesting, and amongst other things the promises that we had that they would form it. The council have always known about that, the road turning into that lot 22 should be a road. I'm going to rotate this here, and we'll take you to, I think it's page 4 on Colin's. One of Colin's files. Yeah.
Actually, if you can cover that, we've actually offered them.
Yeah. In any case, council have always been aware that this was going to turn to legal road. The handout I've given you there in the highlighted section, this is actually from Noble and Goldband Finance. As lawyers are acting together at that stage in terms of negotiating with us. Yeah, I'll leave that for a moment. And you'll see there that their interpretation, the actual people that set up this covenant, their lawyer's own interpretation of this was that that lot 22, the reason for the covenants was that lot 22 would be legal road and would vest. It was consistent with the representations they made to us through that time, and really what that's the intent of that. on page 4 of that document, oh, Connie, go on to this. Okay, sorry, what I was referring to there, you can see on the screen there now. Sean Ward email saying yes, Blake Lot 22 will become road. So really everyone's been on the same page. The representation is made to us, the council's view, and in fact the lawyers of the people that set up this covenant, everyone is consistent that Lot 22 would become road and vest as legal road to council. The decisions that are being contemplated at the moment about dedicating it will mean that it's potentially never vested. Lot 22 particularly doesn't become a part of the subdivision and is never vested as legal road. The solution, I want to be a little bit more solution focused in this deputation and say it's been covered a little bit, but quite simply the solutions are very simple. The council has the opportunity to say to enforce this vesting. It's a part of the resource consent conditions and it's part of the council's role in it. We've seen documents from between Infinity and council and their lawyers talking about indemnifying council from legal action, etc. And I won't go into that too much other than to say that development companies come and go, and I don't think I'd be grabbing hold of any kind of indemnity from a company when it may come back on council themselves. There's no need for that. Council don't have to go down this path. They can simply actually follow the resource consent conditions, put back in there the conditions that were taken out without notification and without any reasons for doing so. They can ensure that the developer has the approvals from all parties, which is also a requirement. We're a stakeholder in the development, and there should be no 223 or section 224 issued without, or even works carrying on without the approval of all of the relevant landowners, and we're certainly a part of this resource consent as Colin's outlined. No one's ever come to us to talk about this, and so it's just another thing that council can easily enforce to take this problem away and push it back to the timeline that should have gone through in a proper process. No. That's all from me. I just urge you all to look at it from a solution point of view and to avoid problems in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. So that does leave some time for questions. So Pauline?
I'm finding this quite challenging to keep up with, of course, but are you basically saying that you're claiming that the resource consent conditions have not been complied with, even the variations, and if they were, you would then be happy?
Yes.
Thank you.
The original consent conditions have dropped off it, as I said, without explanation or without notification. Conditions which would have set aside enough stormwater to cater for this road, and this is really the crux of the problem, that was just taken out with no explanation.
No, that's different than the question I asked. So the question I asked, that consent was granted for the variation.
Yes.
Are you saying that they are not complying with the variation? Or they are, but you don't agree that the variation should have been granted?
I don't agree with that. That condition should have been dropped.
Okay.
They're not complying with the... They're not, because the current resource consent requires them to assure there's adequate stormwater at the end engineering phase for all of the subdivision, and they're not complying with that because the council know that there's not enough.
Yep, so that's where you're saying
yes,
that
they're not complying with the variations even.
I'm assuming that the gentleman making the deputation is happy for Mr Stokes to answer questions on behalf in this way.
Yeah, very good on the detail.
All right, thank you.
If that was resolved and you felt that that was compliant, then you would be happy. That's your main issue.
Yes, and to require the vesting of all of the roads. Yes.
The conditions of the consent require the access lot 612 on the consent to vest as part of the conditions of the consent, and it should actually be shown on the section 223 certificate, which it's not.
It will never happen if this dedication process goes ahead. It will sit out there just on its own forever.
All right, let's take a further question. Yanni.
Yeah, thank you for the deputation. So just obviously the development has changed hands and there's a new owner.
Yes.
Have you had any response from them in terms of a request to do the stormwater, and what's that response been? Because that's what I don't quite understand. Like, they've got a requirement under the resource consent. The stormwater, obviously we've seen the photos that have been produced from the previous deputation, where it looks clear that the stormwater isn't being addressed. So have you gone to the new owners and said, hey, can you fix it? And if so, what's their response been?
Well, I'll start it off. Colin probably is better on the detail of that. Yes, we have. We've had negotiations with Infinity on this. And Colin covered it earlier, that we did offer to contribute some of the money to it, to work with them, to give up land, to give them land that wouldn't otherwise go to them to get that done. We were offered something that basically wouldn't work. There was no certainty of us getting that, and so it wasn't an offer that was capable of acceptance. In fact, they didn't accept our offer, which was quite clear what would give them. So we have tried to mitigate it through those channels.
Let's get the answer to the first question first. There may or may not be time for a second question.
So, yep, the stormwater issue, yes, we did discuss it, and it's been the issue for years, and we've all known it. The council knows it, developer knows it, Delta knows it, and Infinity knew it when they bought in. Yes, we did have extensive discussions with Infinity, Paul Croft. They promised us that the stormwater could go to the land that's about 1.5 metres, 2 metres higher. We said, fine, well, if it goes there, we're happy with that. We'll certainly take our covenants off. Give us the engineering approval just to give us that certainty so we know, and they wouldn't give it to us. And it was only a matter of an hour or two's work to do so, if it was possible, because it's only a matter of levels and things, and then it's overflow from the basins. We've been through it in depth, but yes, we had that discussion, and we know from what we've established and from a report done by Delta, a Riley stormwater review, it's not possible.
Is it just about
no, we don't have time for a further question, so thank you very much indeed for the presentation and for leaving the opportunity for questions to be asked and answered. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
I next call our fourth deputation, Stu Lindsay and Julie Lindsay, to the table, please. Thank you. Good morning and welcome. You've got some papers to distribute? Yep, if you just pop them onto the end of each row there, we'll pass them down. That's great, thank you. Great, so as with others, you have 10 minutes, and that 10 minutes would include time for questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm Stuart Lindsay, this is my wife Julie. I'll take about 4 or 5 minutes with this, and Julie's got a couple of paragraphs she'd like to add.
Great, thank you.
So, good morning, councillors. We come here today to ask you to not circumvent our covenants on our properties that protect our inclusion in the Yolthurst subdivision. I'll give you a brief description of how we get to where we are today. We purchased our 4-hectare block back in 2002. We were the first to purchase one of 10 blocks. The agreement was such that Noble Investments, the vendor, had up to 20 years to get the land rezoned and accepted for residential subdivision. If they achieved this, we were to give them back 3 hectares of our land in return for the access of Lot 22 being upgraded to a full road with full services for the further subdivision and vesting with the council. The first 3 purchases all had similar further conditions in their sales and purchase agreements. That was that Noble Investments agreed to upgrade Lot 22 to further subdivision with all services required for vesting at their cost. The rezoning was achieved in August 2006. Zoning was now Living G. The current subdivision resource consent was applied for in 2007 and was issued in May 2009. In that consent, the developers decided not to use the access Lot 22 as the main entrance, as was intended when we purchased, instead opting for a new spine road continuing right through to Buchanan's Road. At that stage, there was no consulting or renegotiating of our contracts. For many years, the residents have been trying to get council to have Noble follow procedure in regards to the resource consent, so as to protect our part of the subdivision as it states in the consent, that all roads must vest, including the access Lot 22, and all sections must have full services, including stormwater. Also, some conditions such as 9.5, which was to provide easements over Noble's land to ensure there was enough area for stormwater basins. This clause has mysteriously vanished without, it seems, any explanation. That condition alone could have saved all this anguish. Stormwater storage has been a major issue with Noble not wanting to use its land under the pylon basins for Lot 22 stormwater, preferring to show stormwater going to the west of the subdivision some 1.5 metres higher. This, for obvious reasons, does not work, as your stormwater engineers will tell you. This was also on land it did not own. To this day, we have not been shown a stormwater system that works as required by the resource consent. When it became obvious Noble were trying to design us out of the subdivision, we were forced to place caveats over their titles. I believe this would not have been needed if Council had made Noble follow procedure, namely having stormwater engineering designs completed for the whole subdivision prior to them building roads, not letting work proceed with unconsented variations, and consenting unsafe and dangerous roads requiring a safety review. Our caveats were sustained twice in the High Court. Noble Investments by this time formed a joint venture with Goldband, who were the financiers, and Delta, who built the roads. They joined a joint venture with Goldband and Delta, who chose to use mortgagee powers to overturn our caveats and transfer the development. The result being a company created to take over the subdivision called Infinity Yoldhurst. And we thought, great, finally maybe we have a reputable developer that might do what is needed to get everything back on track. After 2 months of negotiations, we were close, but sadly Infinity wanted a deal that only suited them. Namely, we gave them everything they needed straight away, which was signing back the covenants on our titles, giving up the knob, which is the first part of Lot 22, which was required for our intersection, giving them approximately 1,150 square metres of Lot 22, which at present goes right through their commercial area. And in 2 years' time, they would start to provide our stormwater and contribute $300,000 towards our roading, with no form of guarantee in the meantime. All we required was some guarantee and some assurity the stormwater could work. They would not give that. Their lawyer did say to us, if we didn't honour the deed, you could sue us. That didn't instill us with any confidence, especially after they'd lost over $100 million of investors' money in a project in Pegasus. Now we find that Infinity wants the council to help do its dirty work to get around our covenants. Even more disturbing is the argument they offer you for the removal doesn't even have the very clause that prohibits them from being removed. That clause being 1.3.2. To vest or dedicate the part of the servient land included in the access lot or road widening area as defined in the agreements for sale and purchase by which the servient land was sold by the developer as legal road, and to transfer or relinquish all estate and interests in those areas to the local authority for $1. This is backed up by a document found in discovery between lawyers Mears Williams and Cavill Leach dated 19th of May 2010. Your client may be aware that the access sort is temporary measure only, because once the intersection opens, Lot 22 must vest as legal road as per the covenants recorded in your client's title and the resource consent obtained by Noble. All we ask for is the status quo. Let the covenants be decided at mediation and the correct verdict will result. Remember, we bought 4 hectares of land in 2002 with 2 options. Option 1, we gift back 3 hectares and develop our 1 hectare of land. Option 2, we live happily ever after with our 4 hectares. At present, we have neither. Thank you.
I thought I'd finish our talk explaining a little about us and the very unfortunate position we're in. We aren't the bad guys I think some of you believe we are. We bought the land at Yoldhurst Road 15 years ago with the intent of being able to subdivide the land once it was rezoned. As Stu was a builder, it was perfect for us and our 4 children. No rush to develop, but a future we look forward to. Soon we would get a road and our services to the boundary. But no, loophole after loophole, dishonesty, and who could outsmart who. I asked why you would not build the road first, get the residents sorted, and then move on to start the subdivision. What average person would understand the legal writing? It became a dog eat dog, and who's the biggest and richest? And it wasn't us residents. The clause in our covenant is there for a specific reason, to protect us. If you dedicate the road, we lose our protection. We have lived this nightmare too long. We have always brought our children up that honesty is the best policy. Please don't make that not be the case. We leave our future in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. And that has left some time for questions, if there are any questions. No? All right. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning, and thanks for the documentation as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that brings us now to our 5th deputation, and I invite David Rumble to the table, please. Is David Rumble here?
I don't think David's made it yet.
All right, so we'll maybe come back to him if he's here by the end of this section of the meeting. And we move now to our 6th deputation, and I invite Paul Young to the table, please. Paul, good morning. Thank you for joining us. You have 10 minutes, and that time would include any time that you might choose to leave for questions. Thank you.
By way of introduction, I'm one of the neighbouring landowners that own part of the shared driveway that is the boundary between the development and our properties. This dispute relating to this subdivision dates well back before the cathedral repair rebuild dispute. The dispute is not only between the neighbours and the developer but the subdivision, but it is possible to get agreement even between the neighbours. A number of parties over a number of years have tried to facilitate a resolution unsuccessfully. There was a reference to the solution would have been as easy. Well, if it was easy, we wouldn't be here today. I congratulate the Council on the initiative it's taken in this matter and fully support the Council's staff's recommendation. Get some comfort that the Council has been involved in this for some time, have good legal advice, and certainly Councillor Buck has been heavily involved in this a long way through the process. So I congratulate the Council's initiative. I support the recommendations of the Council for the sake of progress. I believe thousands will benefit from the land in question, creating a road through from Yildiz to Buchanan, providing alternative routes, enhance the excellent all-weather soccer fields and facilities built across the road, and further facilities to be built, and improve the safety of the road owned by Transit. I previously raised issues direct with Transit about some of the safety issues in the roading. It appears the objective relates to the removal of the covenants, referred to in page 41 of your papers, and particularly point 2 under point 5.4. And I understand that, like most developments, Infinity has a set of covenants that they would put on the land that does cover some of those covenants that are there, to protect obviously the value of the subdivision and the value of the neighbouring properties. I encourage the Council to vote in agreement for the Council staff recommendation, as I say, for the sake of progress, and to set and let the objectors and Infinity sort this out in their own ways through different appropriate courts. I think they've got arbitration coming up and other processes. This is extremely complicated legal issues around it. While we've tried to simplify it, I'm not sure that's Council's responsibility. My own legal advice on my rights as a landowner, I mean, resource consents can agree things, but that doesn't mean to say they're going to happen. Landowners certainly have still their own rights, and the legal advice I have from White Fox Jones varies from some of the objectors' legal advice on my rights related to it. So it's not a simple, there's no simple solution. Would we be this many years down the track? And certainly I think it did eventuate from a developer who was probably well known for being creative, and I'm sure you know, not worth me to speak about poor of the dead, but you know, it arisen from some pretty difficult developer at the initial stage, and I do have sympathy for some of the people that was talked under objecting to the Council's recommendation, Council staff's recommendation. I do have some sympathy for them, but I vote for progress, and I just thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Great, thank you very much indeed, and that does leave time for some questions if councillors have questions. Jimmy Chen.
I ask you, because with several owners, the particular concern, this is the consenting issue, RMA issue, should be back to normal channel through the RMA process, you know. So that's through the kind of the court to remove those the covenant, rather than the council to, you know, to kind of dedicate of the roads. But you mentioned this solution is difficult, you know, to can resolve. So what's your rationale difficult?
Well, I think that getting agreement between, you know, new developers come on and perhaps the previous developer, I think it's very difficult. It's like when you own a driveway and all the owners have got to approve to something. Status quo is preserved until they all get to agree to it. And I'm sure the council's faced this, and many landowners have in the past. I'm not sure the original comments were a question to me, but in terms of the council, I don't think there's a simple solution, and I'm really supporting the council's proposal for the sake of thousands of others. In terms of this, I don't think if the council voted either way, there's any personal gain to me. There's pluses and minuses both ways. So, as opposed to the previous objectives, and I can understand they have land they can develop, they're inhibited from developing, so they certainly have some significant financial aspects around it. That flooding, you saw pictures of the floodings outside a couple of properties. One of them is mine. It clears pretty quickly, but it does illustrate that the further development would mean that there's a stormwater problem.
Any further questions? Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thank you. So now, our 7th deputation of the morning, I invite Brian O'Malley to the table. And Margaret O'Malley. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
We've got some documentation here that's been distributed. As with the earlier deputations, you have 10 minutes to present to us, and if you wanted to allow time for questions, that would be part of that 10 minutes. Thank you.
That'll be fine, thank you.
Thank you. Great. If you'd like to make a start. Good. Thank you.
Righto. Well, firstly, a little bit of info about ourselves. We're both superannuitants. We're in our 70s. You wouldn't guess that, would you? And I'm a former accountant. We have 5 children, 10 grandchildren. We purchased Lot 1 at Yoldhurst in 2003, and others did in 2002. We also purchased Lots 2 and 3 as an investment, which the adjacent lots. So we now have a 29% share of the Yoldhurst lots, and 9% of this is a beneficial interest in Lot 1. We built a house on Lot 1, November 2006. We unfortunately, well, it was necessarily, incurred significant debt in order to do that. At that time, though, it appeared that there was a real prospect we could subdivide lots on our bigger Lot 1 Yoldhurst, and by this means we would retire our debt. However, as time went on, there was no resolution to these problems at Yoldhurst, and therefore we found that we were in the unfortunate position that we had to sell our house property, and this occurred in May of last year. And we are now living in a farm cottage in the Ashburton area. I'll give you all this sort of prelude, just in order for you to understand this is the real and practical effect of non-resolution of this Yoldhurst problem, extending now for a period of around about 15 years. And as you can see, it has certainly had a critically negative effect on our lives. I've looked back over the last few years and I found that there have been 9 hearings in the High Court, 3 hearings in the Court of Appeal, a safety audit under the auspices of the Council, various Council hearings, maybe 3, to resolve issues, at least 2 hearings with a Commissioner to resolve issues that a Commissioner was required for. There was a perfectly reasonable offer from NZTA to broker a resolution which was rejected. There were possibly 3 offers from Delta, which is owned indirectly by the Dunedin City Council. All those offers were rejected. Infinity has made 3 offers, all of which have been rejected. And finally, just on this question of actions, it's unfortunately to say that, however, that Mr Stokes and others present today in August 2016 placed a vexatious caveat on the properties of all adjoining landowners. This has meant that each owner has not been able to deal independently with their own property. They did that presumably just for their own ends. So and I regard that as a travesty of...
No, let's just continue with the deputation, please.
Regarding the community board recommendation, and so I've set that out there, which is the same wording pretty much as what was in the resolution that was put forward by the community board. But it included, promoted the idea that there should be further legal action under the Property Law Act. However, given past failures, which I've I've detailed the various hearings and court procedures that have gone on over time, it seems to me that there would be little or no hope of reaching agreement in order to get this necessary removal of covenants. I record also at this point that we have had no contact from council of recent times about any matter. As an adjoining landowner, I would have thought that I would have been contacted maybe by Mr. Mora before now, but I certainly have had no contact. My views have never been sought, and we represent 29% of the area. And it is a fact, I think as demonstrated by the detail regarding legal action, that the legal system necessarily just seems to take an awfully long time. So if we launch into some sort of further legal action, looking back on what's happened, it seems to me that it can take up to 2 years to resolve something in the High Court, and followed by a further 2 years in the Court of Appeal. So potentially there's a further 4 years down the track before this thing gets resolved, if it went that way. And I note that despite the fact that the Community Board discussed this matter on a public excluded basis for a full hour, no reasons were supplied in the minutes of the meeting for its decision not to approve the staff recommendation. So in this context, I wonder how it's possible that the Community Board could recommend further legal action through the court. Why would they recommend an action which could tie this problem up for many years ahead? So I'd like now to address the question of safety on the State Highway Yaldhurst Road. We believe there is universal agreement that the fact that the egress and entrance from both Yaldhurst Road and the new football academy opposite is not legally available, that it is not legally available, is detrimental to public safety. Margaret, my wife here, has personal experience of nearly being mown down in her car one day by a big truck with a trailer moving at speed through the Yaldhurst Road end of our Lot 22 access road, missed her by a metre. And that's because this was the only legal access to the Yaldhurst Road site. Of course, the intersection to be created is not yet a legal access. So, in addition, it is abundantly clear to the driver of any vehicle trying to cross Yaldhurst Road from the current egress at the end of Lot 22 that this process has become much more difficult over time, and that it will inevitably become more difficult as time goes on. And we certainly noticed a major increase in the number of vehicles post-earthquake, and it really just accelerated year upon year when we were there. Some lot holders adjacent to Yaldhurst Village, including ourselves, have been very much disadvantaged by the impasse surrounding this development. The staff recommendation provides an opportunity to resolve this matter in a positive way. The need to provide certainty. Well, after 15 years, people, including us, just want to get on with their lives. It is unfortunate that each and every offer that has been made has been turned down. It seems to us that all these offers were made in good faith for the purpose of obtaining a solution to the problem. And I do note that in the course of the opposition to council procedures and what staff have done, that in the past there's been allusions made to council ethics and conduct, and I'd just like to say that most of us neighbours do not go along with those allusions which were made, and I don't know if some of you may remember them or may not, but certainly the staff would, but we don't share that. Thank you. So finally, the recent offers from Infinity did provide a way forward for all parties, that's what we thought, and would have avoided this current difficulty. This company, or to us, has brought hope to a bleak situation. We believe the staff recommendation has been made in good faith in an attempt to finally resolve this difficult matter, so we commend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that has left time for perhaps one question. Pauline.
Thank you. You mentioned the lot 22. Do you imply then that, are you saying that you actually support the Spine Road being the access?
Oh, yes, well, I think everyone does support the eventual, whatever it's going to become. It'll be certainly be a far better access to Yaldhurst Road than from lot 22, because it will be lights,
right?
And so safety will be achieved.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning. We have the paperwork here, and we'll be taking into account, obviously, along with the other deputations, what you've told us when we come to make our decision later. Thank you very much indeed. So I now call our final deputation on this matter, Infinity Yaldhurst Limited. So Mike Kerr, welcome to the table. Thank you. Please take a seat. Thank you very much. And as with the other deputations, you have 10 minutes, and that time would include, if you wish, time left for questions.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present on behalf of Infinity Yaldhurst this morning. My name is Mike Kerr. I'm a partner in the law firm of Venus & Lloyd. We've acted for Infinity Yaldhurst Limited through the due diligence period in acquiring the development land through to the acquisition by Infinity in August 2016. Subsequent to that, we have been assisting Infinity to try and progress this development, which has long stagnated under previous developers. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about the acquisition and what Infinity has been doing since. As I say, Infinity purchased the property in August 2016 at a mortgagee sale. That was a sale by the mortgagee of the previous developer, Noble Investments Limited. The purchase price was $18.35 million, and since acquiring that property in August last year, Infinity has spent over $800,000 on carrying out the subdivision works to comply with every council condition on the Stage 1 subdivision consent. Infinity has also spent a further $1.4 million in upgrading the main intersection, which is a controlled intersection with Yaldhurst Road. That intersection is the main gateway to the development. It also provides access to Canterbury Sport Limited's soccer facility across the road to replace their temporary access. The new intersection which has been constructed will replace the lot 22 access. Earlier this week we have had written confirmation from the New Zealand Transport Agency that they will open the new intersection. It has met all of the requirements of the New Zealand Transport Agency and of Council. At the same time as that intersection is opened, the lot 22 access, which was referred to earlier as being the unsafe access to Yaldhurst Road, will be closed because Yaldhurst Road is a limited access road. It can only have one access within that proximity. There is no question that Infinity is trying to restrict access to the other owners. That simply can't happen. On the deposit of this plan, which would be allowed for by the dedication, that plan will in itself create the legal access from all of the properties adjoining the subdivision right throughout to Yaldhurst Road and also south to the other vested roads in the subdivision to the south. There has been a safety audit report carried out by Council following some of the roading works carried out by the previous developer, Noble Investments Limited. There were some concerns around the width of some of the roads and some of the other traffic treatments. That report was turned into subdivision consent variations through council, which have all been approved. The engineering plans for those safety audit works have been approved by council, and all of those works have been carried out by Infinity Yoldhurst Limited. So Infinity has now carried out all of the work that it is required to do to complete the stage 1 of this subdivision. It is now ready to vest the subdivision plans, lodge them for titles and have titles issued. The thing that is stopping that occurring is the land covenant that's registered on the titles. The land covenant prevents the vesting of road. It does not prevent the dedication of road. So the decision to be made by council today in regard to dedication is the thing that unlocks this subdivision. I just want to be very clear, all of the work has been done for this development for the relevant stage. There has been a lot of talk about stormwater earlier today. Stormwater on a development, like any other physical work, is something that council signs up through its Section 224 procedure under the Resource Management Act. The consents have been varied along the way through this development to cater for what is now being built. There is a completely separate process for council to go through in terms of signing off those physical works, and that is under Section 224. I'd urge council to trust their staff who sign off on those in the subdivision team, as with any other development. We do not consider there's any detriment to dedication. It sounds, when we talk about this, like quite an unusual process. Dedication of roads is not particularly unusual. In fact, dedication of roads is there for this very circumstance, where there are historic interests registered on titles to land that are preventing the vesting of a road in a subdivision. The land covenants themselves only relate to building on the land, so it talks about dwellings being approved, those sort of things. It also restricts certain farming activities, and it refers to maintenance of shelter belts that aren't on our client's property. There is nothing in those land covenants that would be breached by the dedication of this road. This covenant does not prevent roads. The land covenants also lapse on subdivision, and it's our client's position that they have already lapsed. There have been previous subdivisions that have occurred that mean that these covenants are no longer in effect. In any event, there is no risk to council, because at the point at which the subdivision plan deposits, the covenants will not apply. Unfortunately, that means that it doesn't mean that they come off the titles to the property, and that's the court process that we've been talking about. There are disadvantages to the developer in not progressing the dedication. The option 2 in the staff report, which has not been recommended, is that Infinity go to court to progress this. That will conservatively take at least 9 months to get through the first court hearing. We don't have a... we believe that if decided in favour of Infinity would be appealed. So we're probably looking at least another 2 years to get this development open, to open this intersection that's been fully built, and to get this development going that has been dormant for at least 5 or 6 years. Infinity has normal banking covenants, so they have a first mortgage in favour of BNZ, which requires titles to issue by a certain time frame. Initially that was by the end of June. BNZ has granted some indulgence to the developer because it understands the difficulties that we have in this. Without the dedication, this development will continue to stall. It's been sitting idle, and I honestly believe that people driving past this development over the last 5 or 6 years must wonder what on earth's going on. It's been fully built since around 2011, 2012. Yes, there have been some further works. Our client has carried out all of those works. Infinity has carried out all of the subdivision and intersection works to be able to deposit this plan. There is commercial sales that will flow on from the subdivision and create jobs. There are significant buyers in the commercial area. NZTA has given its permission to open the intersection, but will not do so until this road is dedicated. They don't want an intersection that's going to flow into something that is not a public road. The intersection will provide the link to Canterbury Sport. It also links roads into other developments to the south, which is the Delamain development, and to the east, which is the Enterprise development. Infinity has tried for several months to obtain the written consent of the adjoining landowners to remove this land covenant. The objectors issues that you've heard about today are issues with the former developer. They are with contracts with the former developer. Our client purchased at mortgagee sale. It does not take on those obligations. Infinity is not trying to stop anyone doing anything with their land. There's been talk about Lot 22 vesting and the road widening area. There is nothing being done by Infinity to stop that happening. The road widening area referred to in the covenant isn't on Infinity's land. Infinity cannot do a thing about it. That's for the neighbours to build. It's on their land, it's part of the subdivision consent, but it's stage 20. This is a staged subdivision consent that must be done in order. There are 13 neighbours to this development. Of those 13 neighbours, 7 of the 13 have signed the documents required to remove this covenant from the titles. A further 2 of the 13 have signed non-opposition provisions and are contractually obliged not to object to the removal of the covenant. So of the 13 neighbours, 9 will not stand in its way. What we urge Council to do is not let 4 of the 13 hold this development up for several more years while it's tied up in litigation. Just in closing, this is a perfect example of where dedication should be used. This is the purpose for which dedication is used, and we urge Council to accept the staff recommendation to dedicate the road. Thank you.
Thank you for the deputation. That leaves us time for one question. If there is a question, Glenn Livingstone.
It's noticed on the Delta website that in August, 24th August, the sale went through to Infinity, 216, and according to the previous submitter, caveats were placed by landowners in the same month. So have you got any comment on the sequence of events then?
Yes, so there were caveats on all of the development land titles while still registered in the name of Noble Investments Limited. There was court action taken by Gold Band Finance's mortgagee of Noble in order to have those covenants removed and allow the mortgagee sale to progress. That was objected to by the neighbours who had placed the caveats on the development land, and there was a High Court decision issued that allowed those caveats to lapse and allow the mortgagee sale to go through. An appeal against that decision was lodged by the neighbours to the Court of Appeal. That appeal was not progressed, and the appeal therefore was withdrawn, allowing the mortgagee sale to go through in August. Sorry for the long answer to the short question.
No, that's great, thank you. So that now brings us to the end of the 10 minutes. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to join us this morning.
Thank you for your time.
And that brings us, in fact, I probably should just check that David Rumble hasn't entered the room in the meantime. David Rumble's not here. No. All right, so that brings us to the end of the deputations by appointment. Thanks to all of those who've taken the time to participate.